Hello once again, dear viewers. Welcome to this special edition of Open Mic. As you can see, I'm outside of our studio with our special guest for this evening, Mr. Aeneas Chapinga Chuma. He's the United Nations Resident Coordinator here in Eritrea, and he has completed his 15 months of working tour in the country and will be leaving soon. Which is why this interview is taking place. Mr. Chuma, thank you so much for your time. So, Mr. Chuma, as you prepare to leave Eritrea after spending almost 15 months, I would say, what are some of your most significant personal experiences and memories that have had a lasting impact on you?
The privilege, really, of visiting Eritrea, and the privilege to work in Eritrea, to make friends in Eritrea, but also, more importantly for me, is to learn about Eritrea's history, Eritrea's accomplishments over time, and Eritrea's challenges, and also to just meet Eritrean people and visit the Eritrean countryside. You know, I remember going to Karen. I like going to Dufour, especially now that you've got the fog that, sweeps over to Massawa and all that. So, 15 months has gone very fast. I would have loved to stay a little longer. And I will, of course, come back in a different capacity as an individual, not as an official of the United Nations. So it's been overall a very positive learning experience and quite enjoyable, actually. Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Chuma, how would you describe the UNRC's working relations with the government of the state of Eritrea?
I think the United Nations in Eritrea has an excellent working relationship with the government of the state of Eritrea. And that is not taken for granted. I think it is earned trust. On the part of the United Nations, it's also recognizing that Eritrea is unique. It has its own national development vision and strategy. And the important thing is to find ways of being a partner to the government of Eritrea in its endeavors, and the respect the national vision, the national aspirations, and work within that framework. So as a result, I think the government does regard the United Nations as an important development partner, not as a donor. We're not a donor, we're a partner. And so over time, I think an excellent relationship has been forged between the government and the United Nations development system.
In your view, what are some of the key challenges and opportunities for development and cooperation that Eritrea faces, and how have you worked towards addressing these challenges during your tenure here in the country?
Well, Eritrea is like another developing country. Okay, it has its priorities and its vision and its strategy, and the purpose of which is really to raise the quality of life of the good and honorable people of Eritrea, of the state of Eritrea. So the challenges are not unique to Eritrea, as it were. These are challenges that all countries face. But Eritrea in particular does face challenges related, for example, to the impact of sanctions against the country that limit the capacity of the country to realize its full potential. It also limits the capacity of the United Nations as a partner to mobilize resources to support the national development strategy. So there is the issues of overall development, improving access to education for all citizens, improving the status of women and girls in terms of equal access to opportunities, creating opportunities for employment for young people, improving health services and access to health services and the quality of education. These are broad-based challenges. But because of its location, Eritrea also faces climate change challenges. I mean, Eritrea is part of the Horn of Africa. The Horn of Africa has periodic droughts, and more recently, these droughts are more frequent. They are much more severe, and they last longer, and they threaten, the livelihoods of people, particularly in rural areas. So you have challenges of water stress, and then challenges of periodic droughts going forward. But as I mentioned, they are not particularly unique to Eritrea. Other countries in the region face this as well, but to a different degree. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so in your interactions with the Eritrean people, Mr. Chuma, what have you found to be the main aspirations and concerns regarding development and well-being?
I find the Eritrean people honorable, upright, and principled. They subscribe to the noble values of Eritrean society, as it were. So it was indeed a great pleasure to be able to interact with Eritreans, despite the challenges that they face as a developing country. They're still very proud of their country. They're proud of their history. They're proud of their accomplishments, despite the challenges going forward. And as a Zimbabwean, this is something I can relate to. As you know, in Zimbabwe, we also face challenges. There are challenges of development, but we also face challenges that are externally imposed, for example, by sanctions against the country. This is something also Eritrea has to deal with. And so you learn here about resilience and self-reliance going forward. And basically, a country wanting to define its own development trajectory, So the people that I have met, the privilege of knowing and working with and learning from and engaging in debates, have hope for their country, and but recognize the challenges, as it were, and self-sufficient. One of the interesting things that you hear a lot about countries facing starvation. Really, there's a country which is neighboring to Eritrea right now that is very serious. Threats of starvation. You don't face that here, So it has to do with the type of investments that the government has made in people, in local communities, and in promoting resilience and self-reliance despite the challenges, going forward. Yes.
So as you transition to your new assignment, what advice or insight would you offer to your successor in terms of working effectively with the government and people of Eritrea?
My successor is quite an experienced woman. She's currently based in New York, and she's gone through the processes of clearances, and her name is Nalha Valji. And I'm in discussions with her on a weekly basis, basically to make sure that there's a smooth transition between us. So she's experienced, and so I don't have any new advice really to give her. I think in talking to her, it's quite clear that she's prepared to listen and learn and benefit and understand the country better. In terms of and respect the country's priorities, really, the country's culture, and then find then an agreeable way of engaging. There is a quite strong and well-established team of UN agencies that are here, and so she will work with a team of UN agencies that have programs on the ground that are working with the ministries and implementing partners, and that working under the leadership and direction of the government, actually making some transformative differences in people's lives, particularly in education, in health, as I mentioned earlier.
Before your arrival here, you've also closely monitored Eritrea's successes in the fight, in the control of the HIV/AIDS. Can you give us your take in that, Mr. Chuma?
Well, I think Eritrea has done very well in that respect. And yes, you're right. I was the regional director for UNAIDS for East and Southern Africa, and that included Eritrea with Teres, used to work here under my supervision, as it were. And because of the strength of the leadership provided by the government through the Ministry of Health, the spread and the incidence of HIV/AIDS has largely been contained, as it were. I can't say it is 100% eliminated, it isn't. But the level of morbidity is declined in that sense. The level of mother-to-child transmission, I think, has almost been wiped out. And it's because of government efforts, essentially, but also working in partnership with WHO and UNAIDS. Although UNAIDS may not have an office at this point, I think WHO does provide technical support, information sharing, and bring in expertise as needed. But the work is really led by the government, going forward, and they've made tremendous accomplishments in this respect. Yeah, this is something that I observed was when I was head of UNAIDS for East and Southern Africa, which included Eritrea.
So reflecting on the partnership and collaborations you have fostered during your tenure here, what aspects of cooperation between the United Nations and Eritrea do you believe have been most fruitful or impactful?
I think there are several. First is the principle of understanding, Eritrea's priorities, Eritrea's vision, and Eritrea's strategy. And Eritrea's desire to really own their development journey. Once you start from that vantage position, and then you engage, understanding that this is the direction that the country wants to go to. So there are several areas where this approach has worked, and thanks also to the capacities of the UN agencies that we work with. So we see this in the areas of education, in the areas supported mostly, for example, through UNICEF, in areas of health led by WHO. But in all these entities work under the direction of the government and in partnership with the government. And so this is what I think has worked well. Respect of government, work with government, recognize government's priorities, recognize government's belief in self-reliance, and ownership of the development trajectory. And then as a partner, we then identify areas where we can make a constructive contribution based on our mandate and based on our limited resources, as it were, and that's where the partnership basically has been quite successful in that sense. And it needs to be built on. You don't take it for granted, exactly. But we always have to negotiate, work, understand government institutions, government processes, but above all, recognize that this is a country that wants to own its development journey.
Again, Mr. Chuma, while working in Eritrea, did you notice any specific areas where the country could benefit from increased international cooperation? And how do you envision the United Nations continuing to contribute to Eritrea's development in the future?
Eritrea is very important in the Horn of Africa, okay? It is quite stable. If you see the conflict in neighboring Sudan, quite a number of Sudanese now coming to Eritrea because they feel safe. Some of them are in transit going forward. So this is, the role of Eritrea in the Horn of Africa is very important, politically and economically as well, and also developmentally, and particularly on the larger challenges of development around climate change and climate impact. So I think regional cooperation is particularly important going forward. Perhaps improved trade relations among the nations of the Horn of Africa going forward, and advancing peace and stability, going forward. And but of course, the challenge is always, some of these challenges are externally driven. Some of the conflicts really are sponsored by outside forces, as it were. But this, what I see, is particularly important, where the United Nations can make a difference, support efforts at genuine, peace, and stability that is owned and led by, the region itself, the country itself, by Eritrea and others going forward, and advance that, going forward. I think that's an area the UN could play a little more proactive, really, role in supporting efforts to really promote stability and promote development, promote peace, and manage the development challenges related to environment and related to the needs of the vast majority of the population in this region.
Finally, as you bid farewell to Eritrea, Mr. Chuma, what message or final thoughts would you like to share with the government, people, and international community regarding Eritrea's progress and potential?
Well, I've only been here for 1 year, so I think it would be a little arrogant to believe that I've got a little crystal ball, which could look into the future. I personally am grateful, really, for the opportunity to have served in Eritrea, to learn really a little more about Eritrea. I would have wanted to stay a little longer, of course, but our system doesn't work like that. And so the only message is one of optimism for the future, encouragement to stay the course, to own the development trajectory, the development journey, based on the national vision, the national strategy, and going forward. And I also want to end by referring to a conversation that I listened to His Excellency the President, and I was there, when he explained that the country believes in self-reliance, but self-reliance does not mean isolation, okay? Right, and I'm quoting, directly, as I recall. And for me, that was extremely important, because it opens up opportunities for genuine partnership. Okay, you recognize self-reliance as a guiding principle of the nation, but you also recognize that, in fact, it doesn't exclude, it doesn't mean isolation. It opens up opportunities for engagement, as long as that principle is respected going forward. So this is really if you want, the message, as it were. But as I mentioned earlier, for me, it was just a tremendous privilege and a tremendous opportunity at a professional level, at a personal level, and as a Zimbabwean, to serve in Eritrea. And I wish the good and honorable people of Eritrea peace and prosperity as they go forward with their development journey.
So again, thank you so much for your time, Mr. Chuma, for sharing your thoughts about Eritrea and your working relations here in the country. And we wish you all the best in your new post. Dear viewers, that wraps up this week's Open Mic. It is good night from me.